Hey everyone, it's Adrian from Genie Magazine, and I'm here with Monte Mader. And Monte is a New York-based singer-songwriter, girl from the middle of nowhere, who lost everything and is now on the brink of everything. After a tumultuous journey of love and loss, Monte emerges onto the music scene with the release of her debut EP, SKYDIVE, out May 2017. And the first track, Selfish Girl, is a heavy-hitting reflection on her story of love, betrayal and heartbreak. So Monte, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's
and
good to be here.
We're in New York, by the way, so I'm on her home turf rather than the other way around. So I have no idea, like I'm upside down and everything. But I want to start with how you got to New York and doing singing. Because for a lot of people, that's something they dream of from very, very early on. They want to one day make it as a singer. But it's never easy. I mean, it's super competitive. We're probably in the most competitive city in the world. Yeah. So how did you go from where you started as a young girl to being here now in New York?
And I grew up on a cattle ranch in Wyoming. So I literally grew up in the middle of nowhere. I grew up on country music, gospel music, and church hymns.
Right.
And when I was a little kid, I wanted to do music. I was going to be a country singer. And my dad was like, not likely, kiddo, but keep going, just because he was so afraid that I was going to become like a starving artist, which I am to a degree now.
That must work well with being a personal trainer.
It really does. I just don't eat. It's fine. Just
That's a secret to weight loss.
It's not
just
healthy.
Don't eat.
Okay. But actually, when I graduated high school, I was very, very young. I was 16. And my dad didn't want me to go to a state school because of my age. He wanted me to go to a private school until I got a little bit older.
A state school here is one that's like funded by the government that
yes.
like everyone can go to.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Okay.
And it's public. It's essentially public school for college, so to speak. And so he sent me to a private school in Virginia. And he's like, you just have to go 1 year. And his purposes were twofold. He really wanted me to get out of Wyoming and see more because he thought that I would be happier in a city or in a different scenario than growing up as a cowgirl. He thought that I would just be happier in the long run. Sure. And also because of my age. He felt that it was a safer environment. So I went to Virginia and then ended up staying all 4 years. I owned a personal training studio in Virginia after college. Yes. Wow. Okay. I owned it with my fiance at the time. And that whole situation just blew up in my face. And I lost.
In a good way or
in a bad way.
Okay.
In a real bad way.
It blew up like huge in social media or just blew up?
It was so great. No, it blew up into like atomic bomb smithereens. And so I lost everything.
Right.
Like everything. I had no money. My fiance and I just didn't work out. And so I'm sitting there in Virginia and I'm like, what am I going to do? You know, and I obviously at that point was feeling very betrayed because of what he had done. And I had this moment I was like, you know what, I've always wanted to do music, but I never believed in myself. I never believed I could do it. I always, I was really smart. So I felt like, oh, you should just go to college and get a good paying job and just
get a good degree, get a good job.
Exactly. Yeah. Follow that formula because you're smart and that's what you should do.
Yeah.
And even post-college, I was accepted to graduate school to be a physician's assistant. But at the last minute, I decided not to go because I was like, I know that this
physician's assistant. Wow.
Yeah, okay. This is not what I want to do. I was also eligible for physical therapy school. But I knew that wasn't what I wanted to do. And then when everything kind of fell apart, I was like, I've kind of already lost everything, so I don't really have a lot to lose at this point.
Right.
So, so if I fall flat on my face and I have to go home for a year or something, I was like, this isn't the end of the world. So, like, I packed up everything I had, which I only had, like, my personal things.
Yeah.
And I drove a U-Haul to New York. And I came here, I had my personal possessions, and I had $800.
Wow.
And that was it.
Wow.
And I was
How old were you when you did that?
23.
23.
Yeah. And I was just like, okay, here we go. Let's see if we can make this work. And I found this teeny tiny, like, it wasn't really a room. It was like a closet in Ridgewood, Queens. And I moved here February 12th. No, I moved here February 10th. I started working at Equinox, the company I trained for, on February 12th. And then I just started...
days before Valentine's Day.
I know. I started rebuilding from there.
Yeah.
And and it was one thing where at first I was just like, I am not going to make it. Like, this is not going to work. I don't know how this is going to happen. But it was just kind of a process over time. So the first 6 months was just about getting on my feet, trying to heal emotionally. And then I just started writing, and I started writing a lot. And I kind of meandered through various styles of music before I really landed on a sound that I felt represented me.
Yeah, because I was listening to some of your music, and in a good way, it's eclectic, like not all over the place, but one of them was a bit more poppy, and then ballady, and then the latest one, which I did listen to, Selfish Girl, was definitely not. How would you describe that sound? That's not it's power ballad.
It's a power ballad. It's pop rock. Yeah.
You sound angry.
It was a very angry song.
Right.
But it's a fun song. And so like after a while, it took me a while to kind of land on that. And it's an eclectic sound, but it all works together. And so it took me about 2 years of recording and mixing and mastering to finally get to the place now where I'm ready to release and book tours and things like that. Right. So that's how I ended up from Wyoming to here.
Okay.
Sitting with you.
So how long has the journey been so far? You said it took you 2 years to sort of find your sound.
Yeah, so actually this coming February will be my 3rd year in New York.
Right, okay.
Yeah.
What's the hardest part of doing, like taking that risk? I mean, I'm assuming that you moved to New York, it's not all, everyone lays down the red carpet for you.
No, it's actually the antithesis of that.
Yeah.
Everyone's like, hey, you got this? All right, fine, whatever. Just
so
walk on.
What has it been like moving here? What have been some of the struggles moving to New York and trying to make it as an artist?
There was a lot of struggles. So for me, I had the emotional side of things, dealing with like my ex-fiance who had been like unfaithful to me. He'd also put a bunch of debt in my name, so I had to manage. I actually had to file for bankruptcy when I first moved here.
Wow.
So 6 months into being here, I filed for bankruptcy at the age of 23.
Okay.
And just literally had to start from the bottom up.
Yeah.
So I think that in and of itself was the most difficult thing because I felt like I had failed before my life even started.
At such a young age.
It was just this moment of, I can't believe I've messed all of this up already.
Did you feel, this is getting a bit deeper, but did you feel that his indiscretions were your fault? Is that what you're saying?
For a while I did. At first I thought, maybe I should have done this, or maybe I should have done this differently, or I should have seen it coming, or things like that. But then after a while I realized that like I was a trusting person who loved someone.
Which
and there's
is
nothing wrong.
what you want in a relationship,
there's
right?
nothing wrong with
especially
that.
at that age.
Yeah, and especially he was my first long-term relationship. I met him when I was 21.
Right.
And we were together until we broke up when I was 23.
Yeah.
And it was my first long-term relationship. Yeah. Obviously, we were engaged. Like, he had met my family. My family loved him.
So it was perfect.
It was perfect. Like, I couldn't have created or written a better scenario. It was so perfect. It was everything I thought I wanted. My dad loved him. My family loved him. And then it just exploded.
So how do you move past something like that? Because that sounds, obviously it's incredibly tough.
Yeah.
But something like that a lot of people would just take that and then give up. You obviously haven't, you've done the flip. But there must have been times when you just went, this is too much for me to handle, that's it.
Well, the first month that I was here, I cried myself to sleep every night.
Right.
And it was because not only are you trying to get past this situation, but you've just come to a city that you don't know where anything is.
Yeah.
You don't know anybody.
Yeah.
Because I didn't know anyone when I moved here. Mm. And I was starting a new job and like all these things. And it's the most alone feeling that you can possibly create. So I think one of the hardest thing in New York, if I had to describe it as one thing, is the loneliness. Yeah. Because you're on your own, and you have to build a new foundation. And then for me, piggybacking the emotional struggle on top of that made it extremely difficult.
So how did you get through that?
Part of it was, I did take therapy. Mm-hmm. I went and saw a counselor for a while just to help me work through the emotional part, get past the self-blame, because I think, especially women tend to, they kind of self-deprecate, they self-attack. It's always their fault. Yeah. And so I had to get past that, and I had to let go the shame of feeling like that was my fault, but also shame dealing with the fact of the bankruptcy and feeling like I failed, because my life, I've always been a perfectionist. Yeah. I've always been an achiever. I've always been, I graduated high school when I was 16. I was out of college when I was 20. I owned a business by 21. So I was always an achiever. So to fail that...
Well, filing for bankruptcy is complete polar opposite.
Exactly. So like failing, I guess, in such an extreme way was devastating to my personality and to my ego. And so I had to rebuild past that. But the other part of it was like my personal faith. I spent a lot of time in prayer, and sometimes it was like, Lord, I just need enough to make it through this week. If I can make it through this week...
I'm not asking too much. Just
exactly.
One day at a time, 1 week at a time.
And that's what I had to do, is I just had to break it up into little tiny pieces. And just like, I just need to get through today. Yeah. I just need to get through next week. Yeah. I just need to get... And then eventually I stopped having that thought. Right. And it was, this is okay. Like, I'm doing all right.
Do you remember the first moment when you caught yourself thinking, actually, this might work?
Yes, I do. When I first moved here, personal training is a kind of field where you have to build up a clientele.
Yeah.
It takes you a while to make a considerable amount of money, regardless of how good you are or your background. Yeah. And so while I was in that phase, I did some promotions modeling, and I had to model for this club. It was a new EDM club that was opening up.
Right.
And basically what they hired me to do was get dressed up, show up, and just be one of the pretty girls hanging out with patrons.
That sounds like a hard job.
But the music's awful.
Okay. All right.
And I remember sitting there, and I'm like, it was, my shift was 12 to 4 a.m. And I had to be at work the next day at 8 a.m. And I remember sitting
sleep
there.
Is optional.
Yes, sleep is for the weak. It's fine. So I remember I had to do that for 2 weekends in a row, and I started to think, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore.
No sleep or the music?
The both.
Okay.
Doing that particular promotions job as well as the no sleep. Yeah. And so, but when I had gotten my first paycheck from Equinox, and then I got my check from that modeling gig for that 2 weekends that I did it. And I remember looking at that amount of money, and it was exactly how much I needed to pay my rent.
Wow.
And I was like...
Coincidence?
You know what? I was like...
Or your prayers are working.
Yeah, I was like, this may actually work.
Yeah.
I was like, I may actually be able to do this. Yeah. And I had so much good fortune at Equinox as well. For most trainers, it takes about 5 months to completely ramp up to what's considered full-time. Okay. I did it in 3 weeks. And I was the top 5 in the club in 2 months. Yeah. I was number 1 in the club in 4 months. And so it was rapid. I contribute that a lot to prayer, because that was something I kept praying. I was like, Lord, I need clients. Yeah. People would just come up to me and be like, I've seen you working with someone. I want to train with you.
Yeah, it must be part of your vibe and your energy as well, though. I mean, otherwise they come up to you and if they don't like you, they wouldn't have stayed with you.
Yeah, they'd have been like, goodbye. And so by the time I moved here in February, by the time I got to April, I was making enough money to get by without panicking. Wow. And so and then I, of course, was working through the bankruptcy at that point, so that was difficult. But getting to that place, realizing I'm about to pull this off. Yeah. Like, looking around, I'm about to pull this off.
Checking that, it's not a candid camera.
It's like, no one's following me, are they? Yeah. And I remember calling my dad in that kind of April, because I was talking to him about, hiring an attorney and the things I had to do for this bankruptcy stuff. Yeah. And I was so upset. Even though I was doing okay now financially, I was so upset about the whole situation. And my dad was like, he's like, do you realize what you're doing? He's like, I told you could come home and stay here for a while and get back on your feet. And he said, you refused to do that. He's like, you didn't give up. He's like, you've already won. And so that kind of shifted my mentality of be like, oh, I'm actually already winning because I didn't give up. I didn't just curl up in a hole and just be like, no, I'm not going to do this anymore. That was the kind of the turning point for me. Sure. Yeah.
I want to ask you about, just given what you've told me, I want to ask you about your song, which is not on the EP, Bend. Was that song written about that period in your life? Sort of what happened with your, at that time, fiance, and then deciding to go out and strike out on your own? Was that written at that time?
It wasn't written at that time, but it was written about that time.
Right.
Because when I finally got to the point where I was doing well, I felt good, I kind of healed past that point, I looked back on it and realized how much of myself I had given up to make him happy. Yeah. And, everything to where I supported his dreams, even if he didn't support mine. And I changed who I was. So be with him.
It sounded like you weren't able to be yourself. Everything you were doing was to make him happy, and then he wasn't. Obviously.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where you hold on so tightly that you lose yourself. And so for me, realizing that, and also I have several nieces. Right. I mentioned the older one to you. Yeah. She loves music. And I partly wrote that song for them because what I wanted it to say was, you don't have to mold who you are to be with the right person. Yeah. You'll fit with the right person. Yeah. And even in the video where it shows us having the negative words, that maybe we believed about ourselves or that people told us, and showing us wiping it off, it was symbolism for them to be like, people don't get to dictate who you are. Like, you get to choose who you are. And just because someone has said this to you or made you feel this way doesn't mean that it's true. Sure. And so that was also, it was an anthem of my personal victory over it, but it was also for them to know that they didn't have to make that same mistake.
Do you feel like you still struggle with that any more now? I mean, you seem super confident now, but I know
much more confident than I used to be.
Much more confident, but do you still struggle with that sort of not really feeling like you can express yourself, not knowing who you are now? Or is that...
No, so my problem is I always want to help people. So sometimes...
That sounds like a good problem to have.
I know. But sometimes for me, I won't say no when I should. So I'll always try to help people, even at the expense of myself.
Yeah.
Even if it means, this is not going to benefit my art, or it's gonna, it's gonna wear me out, or it's not a good situation for me to be in emotionally. I tend to do that. I have to pull myself back and just be like, okay, is this a good arena I'm entering in? Because I don't have to say yes just to make them happy.
Yeah.
That's where I find that I still struggle the most with that line of thinking. And it's just because I want to help.
Yeah.
But I've also learned that self-care is just as important as others' care.
Well, as I say, if you don't take care of yourself, there's none of you left to take care of other people.
Yeah.
So most of the people that I interview have that same problem, but I think it's a good problem to have.
Yeah, it is. You just have to learn to control it and kind of look at it from the big picture.
Yeah.
And I had a friend that he gave me the best analogy, was that he's like, when you're on an airplane and they show you the oxygen mask, they always say, put your own on, then help someone else. Because if you pass out, you're not going to be able to put anybody, give them help at all. And that has been really true. So I've emphasized a lot of self-care in the past year.
Yeah.
That's been a goal.
That sounds really important. Tell me about your father, your dad.
Yeah.
Obviously, he's a huge formative experience, been hugely influential on your life. He's no longer with us. But take us through the sort of person he was and the influence he had on who you are even now.
Well, my dad is my absolute hero. I still text him every day. He's saved in my phone as Captain America, because that's what I used to jokingly call him. And he actually looks like an older version of if you aged Captain America, that's what my dad looked like. But he raised me by himself. My family really split up when I was younger.
Right.
My mom left, and then later 3 of my older siblings did, or all 4 actually did at one point.
Right.
So my younger brother and I were the only 2 siblings that were raised together our whole lives, and we were raised by our dad exclusively. He was where I started doing music. My dad loved music. He loved it. He was an amazing guitar player. He was a drummer. And when I was young, I would sing in church, and he would also take me to nursing homes, and we would sing to the people in the nursing home, because they're there by themselves all day. Yeah. And we would sing songs from their era, so they would know all the songs we sang. I know songs from the 1940s, word for word. I got this. Okay. But that's where the love of, and I remember I was 5, and I begged him, I was like, Daddy, I want to go sing with you. I want to sing with you at the nursing home. And he was like, okay, you have to learn the song Daddy's Hands from memory and be able to sing it right, and then I'll let you come sing with me. And I remember, and I'm out on the ranch, and I'm practicing on the gravel roads, practicing the words. I'm sitting down, and then I remember running into the house and be like, Daddy, I can sing for you. I can sing for you. Yeah. And so he got out his guitar, I sang it for him, and then the next time he took me to sing with him, and we did that my whole life. Every time I was home, I would sing with him either in church or at a nursing home. Yeah. And he was my best friend. And he grew so much even as I got older. When I was younger, he was very strict and very firm and very kind of my way or the highway. And then as he aged, he grew this sense of compassion, and he grew understanding. And it was so cool because we kind of evolved together. And at first, when I moved to New York, my dad was petrified. He was just
which I can understand.
Yeah.
Young girl moving to New York.
He was supportive, but he just was so worried all the time. And he was always, ever since I came to the East Coast, he was always concerned for me because he knew how much time I spent alone. Because he's like, you don't have family. You have friends, but you're not connected with your core group. And he made it a point. I came out when I was 16. It's been almost 8 years since I've been on the East Coast. My dad has been out for 5 of my birthdays. Right. He always tried to come to my birthdays because he's like, I do not want you to celebrate this by yourself. Yeah. And he would surprise me a lot. He planned elaborate surprises where I'd be eating at a restaurant with friends, and my dad would just walk in. And I would go sprinting across the restaurant to go find him. That's so cool. And then especially as he watched me evolve over the past few years, and he passed away this past July, so it's pretty recent. But the last 2 conversations I had with him, one was I was talking about music, and I said, Dad, the EP's pretty much done. Yeah. I was like, I just have to get it mixed and mastered. And it was the first time that he said, Kiddo, you're going to make it. He's like, you're really going to do this. Yeah. And he's like, what I want you to know, he's like, I don't want you to ever give up. And I'm like, okay, Dad, don't worry, I won't. I was like, I've worked too hard to get to this point to give up now. Yeah. And that was one conversation. Then the second conversation, I was meeting with my boxing coach, and I was in a lesson. My dad called, so I didn't pick it up. I called him on the way out of the gym, And he's like, oh, I butt dialed you. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. So, but we start talking. He was in a great mood. And this was actually the day that he passed away. Wow. It was earlier that day.
Right.
And he was just in such a happy mood and just, you know, really joyful about things. I told him I was in training because I've been taking boxing for a music video I have coming out later. So I've been training because I want it to look like I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
So I
sort of stuff. Yeah.
I got it. So I call him and he's just really excited and he, out of nowhere, and my dad was never one to be extremely complimentary. Mm-hmm. He was more towards the constructive criticism side.
The tough love, yeah.
Yeah, he was a lot of tough love.
But when he gives you one compliment, you latch on to it.
This is the best thing ever. But he just kind of went, he was like, I admire you so much doing what you do. He's like, being in New York, and I know how stressful it is for you and how hard it's been for you and you're by yourself. And he was like, I am just so proud of you for doing this. Yeah. And he kind of went on this tangent for a while, and I'm holding the phone like, where's my father? What did you do with him?
So it wasn't just a little compliment, it was a big one.
It was a big one. And then he was talking about how he wanted to come see me for my birthday, which was in October. He said, maybe I'll fly out and come to the big city again, because he did come here. He was not a fan, but he came to see me.
Okay. Oh.
By the time the trip was over, he's like, I'm ready to go home.
I'm done.
I'm ready to go. But at the very end of the conversation, he was just like, I'm so proud of you, and I just want you to know that I love you.
Yeah.
And that was the last thing my dad ever said to me, because 6 hours later, I got a phone call that he'd been in an accident.
Wow.
And it was like, it was awful, but it was also, I feel so privileged that I had that moment, because we had been fighting the 2 weeks before that.
Oh, that would have been awful.
Yeah, and because my uncle had passed away, and there had been some tension between the two of them. And so I was going to my uncle's funeral, and he wasn't going to go. Oh, wow. And I was just at him about it, because I thought he was in the wrong. And so we had been fighting and fighting and fighting, and we had that last conversation, and the last thing was, I love you too, Dad. And
that's so important, isn't it? When someone leaves your life, that you remember the last
Yeah.
The last conversation
and
you had.
And I think for me, like being so close to my dad, I feel like that was divine providence of I'm not going to let him leave the earth with that being between you.
Yeah.
Because that would have destroyed me.
Yeah.
You know, you can see me getting a little whoop.
Yeah, well, I am too, so. Yeah.
It was just a hard summer because my uncle passed away at the end of June. My dad passed away in mid-July. And then I lost a friend and my grandmother in August. So it was one blow after the other. And it was at that point, actually, after that series of events, that was my first moment of, I don't think I can do this.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think I can even finish the EP. I don't know if I can keep going on. I don't know if I can stay in New York. Yeah. But then I had that other conversation of, I promised my dad I would finish. I promised him I would finish. And then I ended up changing the name of the EP. I changed a few of the songs. I decided to put other songs in there.
Right.
And I decided to make Skydive the title track of the EP because it was kind of it was written about my dad.
Right.
And it was written about him being like, no, you can do this. Because my whole life, my dad said, if you set your mind to something and you work for it, you will get it.
Yeah.
You will get it. And that's what Skydive was really about. Skydive was about like the things in my life that I've dealt with and overcome and learning that like, I can do this. But it was written kind of as an homage to him and his belief in me. So that's why it became the title track of the EP.
Sure. Well, on the subject of the EP, let's go through it. So when is it out? It's out in May. And we are now in January, aren't we? 2017.
Yes.
So now first off, you told me you write, you compose, and you perform.
Yes.
So I have huge respect for anyone who doesn't just do the performance, but actually writes it and compose it. So these songs, you said one of them was a bit different, but let's go through. There are 6 here. So the EP is Skydive. And maybe you just tell us a bit about what each song means to you and where it came from, because you wrote it yourself. So number one is Four Senses.
Four Senses is my more love ballad of the EP, and that's about falling in love. So the hook behind it is we all have 5 senses. Love is blind, so we go down to 4.
So cool.
And that's kind of the hook behind it, because I find myself, and I'll get maybe into more detail about this later, but you meet someone that you click with, and all of a sudden, it's just your entire life changes. Like in that moment, and you're like, what just happened to me? And you almost try to talk yourself out of catching feelings.
Yes.
Like, I'm not going to do it.
If you've been hurt before,
I'm not going to do it. But it just happens. And so that was about, like, falling in love again and, like, really just being like, oh, I'm about to go into this again. Uh-oh.
Well, you say love is blind is interesting. We become completely blind to all their faults.
Exactly.
And sometimes it can later come back to bite us.
You're so wonderful.
Everything about you is perfect. I love the way that you annoy me. It's so cute.
The way that you annoy me is perfect.
Yeah. Moving on. No personal issues there. Number 2, Lie to Me.
Lie to Me is actually a story about a relationship that I had in college. And it was, he was one of my really good friends. We weren't dating, we never did. But I really, really liked him for a period of time. And so sometimes I'm like, I just wish you would say you liked me, even if you don't, because it would make me feel better. And so that's what Lie to Me is built on, is like, just tell me that you care.
Okay.
Just tell me. And then if you do, like, I'll feel good about it. I know it's not true, but we'll circle back to that when we get there.
Just out of interest, does he know now?
No.
Is he going to be watching this?
I don't know. It's on the internet.
Will he know who he is?
Probably not.
Okay. All right. Otherwise, it's going to be a really awkward way of finding out.
Otherwise, it's going to be like, surprise!
Okay. It's like, oh, I've never told you this, but...
Side note.
All right. Number 3, Little More Love.
Little More Love is another kind of power ballad. It's a little sassier. It's a little more rock-based. Nice. And this one's just about, like, I went through this period of time when I was younger. I'll preface this. When I was younger, I was very overweight. I was really young for my grade range, and I was really awkward. And so I did not get male attention, period, until college, really. Right. College was when I kind of, like, wasn't as homely, and I had lost weight, and I kind of evened out a little bit. Yeah. So, like, I started getting all this attention, and then post-college, that kind of carried over. And so for a while, I just wanted to go on dates with people. Yeah. I'm like, I'm just going to go on dates with everyone.
Enjoy the attention. Yeah, not everyone. Okay, yeah.
I don't believe it. Not everyone deserves a chance. There's just
there are some lines that we will never cross.
There are some lines, but that was just enjoying the attention and just kind of being like, I need a little more love, so I'm gonna go.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, number 4, Risky.
Risky is actually written about a very specific person in my life. And one of the lines, actually, I was on the phone with him, and in the first verse it says, he likes those shots, that whiskey on the rocks. And he had a conversation. We were talking about drinks that we liked and things like that, and he talked about having whiskey on the rocks. Yeah. And all of a sudden I was like, ooh, song, sorry, I gotta call you back. So, like, I started writing, but it's about kind of falling in love with the bad boy to a degree, but also maybe the one that doesn't look as good on paper. Yeah. So it's like, okay, if you're faced with this option of, this isn't maybe what I thought would be right for me,
but I'm gonna go
but this may just actually work.
Yeah.
And so that's really what it was about, was this is not what I expected it would be.
Yeah.
But this is working.
Yeah.
And this, like, I'm okay with this. Yeah. And that was what it was.
Oh, that's beautiful. Oh, the title track. Oh, not the title track, but the one I was just listening to on the plane trip here. 5, Selfish Girl.
Selfish Girl is another power ballad. It's pop rock. It also has a little bit of country rock in it. That just kind of, like, leaks into my music because I grew up on country.
Leaks.
It just kind of
permeates.
It just soaks into there. But it's about a relationship where a woman, me, finds out that her man's cheating on her, and her response to that. Yeah. And it kind of ties back to a little bit of what I call hillbilly justice. So where I'm from, you do something like that to someone, they're going to respond, and it may not be as favorable. So in the song, in the story, she ends up tying up the man and the woman. She finds them cheating in the backseat of a car.
I was going to say, the lyrics were something about writing your name or a heart or something.
Yes,
and then you left a surprise for the local police.
Yes, so
I'm curious.
The way that paints the story is she comes home, she finds them doing things in the back of the car, so she writes her name on the window. That's like her first indication that she's there. And then as she's leaving, she ties them both up naked to a tree. So that's where the line public indecency comes from. Okay. So she left a little present for the local police, public indecency tied to an old oak tree. Right. So she leaves them tied up and then runs off with his best friend. Right.
I've never heard a story like that. But that sounds...
I may or may not have heard of a story like that before. It's possible. Wow. I'm not going to throw it out completely.
I feel sorry for the local police that when they're like, what are you going to do?
They're like, oh, okay.
Untie us. And then the title track, which we mentioned briefly before, but Skydive.
Skydive is it's an acoustic piece that's going to be on the song, but it's really about self-belief. And it's about getting into that place where you're like, you know what? Whatever it is that I want to do, I can do. Whatever it is that I have to overcome, I'm going to overcome. And the first verse talks about, the first line is, you tried to break my wings so I couldn't fly away from here. And for me, it was I was surrounded a lot of my life with people that were extremely negative and demeaning, and it really damaged me internally, which is why, I always thought I was ugly. I always thought I wasn't good enough. I always thought I wasn't smart enough. I was never going to be pretty enough. And it was this constant barrage of that kind of information. And so the first verse talks about that, as far as like, no, like I can Like, whatever, just because you said that, just because you tried to slow me down, doesn't mean that I have to.
Yeah.
And then the second verse addresses more specifically appearance, because that was a really big struggle of mine, especially being overweight and being bullied and, you know, going through that whole transition. But it references puppet strings, as far as like, I always felt like I had to do whatever it was that other people wanted me to do. So when I came to New York to do music, some people were very disappointed in me because I'm so book smart. Like, oh, you should have been a doctor.
You're
or you
throwing
should have
it
been
all away.
Yes, you're wasting your time. And so for me, it was learning to kind of cut those strings and just deal with people's disappointment. And know that, like, it's my life. And it is okay if you are disappointed because you're not the one that has to live in this. And for me, ultimately, what it was that I knew that if I didn't try, didn't at least give it a go, I would end up in my 40s, 50s, and I would look back and say, what if I had just tried? You know, and then the third verse of that song talks about falling in love again and believing and figuring out that, like, yeah, whatever's hurt me in the past is there and it taught me, but I am going to get past it. I am going to meet someone who's not going to do that same thing. And I'm kind of taking hold of that belief. So that song is like the most personal to me because it directly references several struggles that I went through. And that's why I'm so excited about that song. But
you have every right to be. It sounds like a lot of the writing, most of the writing comes from personal experience.
Yes, almost exclusively.
Right.
Yeah, most of my songs. I do have a couple ones that aren't going to be released yet, but pop songs that are a little bit more generic, I guess is the best way to say that. But most of my songs come from a direct experience with me because then I know how to say what it is I'm feeling. I know how to, you know, tell a story because I was in the story.
Rather than someone else having written the story.
It's hard to speculate someone else's story, you know, and so that's why I think that, and also the music that I relate to the most, I always find I know that this person must have gone through that because of the way that they communicate it. And I think with music, it's, you know, the international language because you can communicate a feeling.
Even if they don't understand the lyrics.
You can communicate a story. And that, for me, is the most important thing because what I'm hoping that my music does and my story does is helps people that maybe are going through a hard time or they feel like they failed or they feel like their life blew up. That they can listen to it and A, it makes them happy and brings them joy, but B, it makes them realize, oh, wait, I'm strong enough. I can do this. Like, I can get back up. She did. You know, and I'm a cowgirl from Wyoming. Like, if I did it, you can do it. Like, go for it, you know?
I don't know. Like, you say cowgirl from Wyoming. I think that sounds pretty cool, but obviously...
So, let's, you know, I'm
small
from
town girl.
The literal middle of nowhere. We're the least populated state in the United States.
Right.
And there are actually more cows than people.
Okay.
So, that's what we're dealing with.
I don't think I'll visit just yet.
Yeah. It is beautiful, though.
Okay. All right. If people want to catch up with you, like social media wise, or your website, or listen to your music, what's the best way for people to do that? So
obviously these aren't out yet. They'll be coming out. The songs will be coming out incrementally over the spring, and then the full EP will be in May. But if you want to follow me on social media, Facebook Monte Mader, and then Monte Mader Music on Instagram are the two ones where that's where all the information's going to be. So.
Okay, and I'll link all of those up below. Okay, let's wrap this up. I have 10 questions for you.
10 questions.
Nothing to do. All right. There's no rush here.
I don't have sleeves.
Number 1. What is your favorite word?
Favorite word? Hope.
I don't think I've had that one before. It's a nice one. What is your least favorite word?
Impossible.
What about what turns you on? Whenever I ask Americans, they tend to get it, but whenever I ask a non-American, they go like, one girl literally asked me, sexually? I'm like, no. What turns you on? It could be spiritually, creatively, whatever.
That's tough. I think it's connection. Like whether it's you connect with something emotionally or you connect with something somebody says, that immediately it's like, the humanness in connection for me, all of a sudden I'm like, the world is different. From that moment on, whether it's like drastically different or just a little different, it's different from that time the connection happens.
What about what turns you off?
Whining.
To that one much more quickly.
Like, I hate it when people complain about everything. Like, that's what, like, we talked about this love-hate relationship with social media. Like, I watched this video the other day where, like, it showed these parents, like, scolding this puppy because he broke into their Hawaiian King's bread and ate it. Like, and the puppy just looks so cute, but you can tell he knows he did something wrong.
Yeah.
And people on there, oh, this is abuse, this is... And I'm like, if this is the only thing you have in your life to complain about, you have an amazing life.
Yeah.
Do you want to trade places?
Yeah.
So, like, for me, whining, I'm like, if you don't like something, do something about it. If you can't do something about it, move on.
So, question, what sort of personal trainer are you then?
A little bit harsh.
I never would have guessed. Okay.
Yeah. So it's that tough love thing.
Yeah.
If someone comes into me, oh, I didn't lose weight this week. Well, I told you to cut back on your alcohol. You didn't.
Yeah.
You know, or oh, well, you had pasta every night this week and then had wine after. You know, things like that. So it's because it's a matter of I don't think that not being completely honest helps them.
Yeah.
You know.
What about number 5? What sound or noise do you love?
Thunder.
Oh. What about what sound or noise do you hate?
There's a few. I really hate the alarm clock noise.
Okay.
It's an evil invention.
Yeah. Well, you can slap it off quickly.
I know, right?
Enough.
Turn it off. I have to like set music to my alarms because I can't handle the sounds. I would rather have someone singing to me in the morning than have.
But on the other hand, if you hate it, we'll wake you up. So
that's
because you have to wake up to turn it off.
That's true. That's true.
Well, there you go. All right. We talked about this before, what is your favorite curse word? And if you can't say it, just give us a clue. Or do you never, ever curse?
I don't never, ever curse. I curse when I get really angry. And then it's all's fair. All's fair at that point. I think most commonly is the one I would use the most.
Okay. That's very mild.
Yeah,
just
it's
to give
very
you an
mild.
idea.
Yeah.
I've had much worse.
I bet.
Yeah.
But like that would be the one that like if I wasn't angry and happened to swear, that would be what I would say.
Okay, all right. That's very mild
Yeah.
in comparison to what
I try.
What about what job or profession other than your own would you most like to attempt?
I would love to get into marketing. Actually, I'm looking at doing an online MBA program specializing in marketing, but for entertainment purposes.
Sure.
So as I've gone through this whole musician process, the marketing is fascinating.
The business side of
the
it.
business side of it, and so that's something I'm actually looking into. But that would be something I would love to do other than my fitness profession.
Well, what about what job or profession other than your own would you definitely not like to attempt?
Anything with a desk. I would. Sorry, guys. I would lose it. I worked as an optician for an eye doctor for 6 months. And they realized, they're like, oh, she's really smart. We're going to have her sit in the back and file insurance. I wanted to chop my arms off. It was so awful. Yeah. I would leave at the end of the day in so much pain and so tired. And I've never not been active. Yeah. I grew up working on the ranch. When I was in high school, I worked for my dad in the summers, manual labor. And I've always had jobs where I'm on my feet and I'm moving and I'm moving and moving. Sitting behind a desk for 8 hours at a time would be very... I don't think I could do it.
Sitting at a desk with the 4 walls,
yes.
9 to 5.
Yes, I don't think I could. I think I would get very depressed.
Okay, I completely understand that.
My clients come in and they're like, we admire you so much. I'm like, man, you're stronger than me. I couldn't do your job.
Final question. If God exists, what would you like to hear him or her say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Well, I 100% believe he exists. I think the thing I would... most like to hear is just very simply, good job. You did everything that I intended for you to do. Yeah. And that's what I'd like to achieve, is knowing that I lived with purpose, that my life affected people outside of me in a positive way, that I lived for more than just myself. Because for music, it's not about, for me, it's about, like, I want to make a living doing this. I want this to be my job. I want to write for other people. I want to use my business sense to help others. I don't need to be the next Beyonce or Taylor Swift. I have no intention of being that.
It'd be nice.
It'd be nice. So it's like, that's one of those things, if it happens, great. Yeah. If not, and I'm making a living doing this, awesome. I'm completely okay with that. But for me, the biggest thing is, am I living for something greater than myself? Yeah. I think the people that I meet in life that are the most sad are the ones that live exclusively for themselves. Yeah. And so for me, like when I die, like how I want people to remember me and how I would like to be greeted at Heaven's Gate, so to speak, is that regardless of how small the chapter was, people are glad I was part of their life story. Nice. And that's the impact that I want to have.
Lovely. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This was fun.
Lovely meeting you. And I want to thank everyone for watching, and I'll put all the links that Monty mentioned below, and we'll speak to you next time.